process, preparation for your agency review. Like the audit, a bond rating is a very important assessment of your local government. It takes a lot of work to prepare for it. Our panelists represent both the professionals and the staff that are involved in obtaining a bond rating. And today, you'll be hearing a presentation from Matthew Jessup, Ellen Sandman, Sherry Tracy, and Kathy Mantell. Just a reminder, make sure that your phones are off or on mute. Okay, I'll begin with some background information on our speakers. Matt Jessup is a partner with McManaman, Scotland & Bauman, LLC. Mr. Jessup works primarily on a broad array of public finance transactions and redevelopment projects. He represents municipal, county, and authority issuers, issuing hundreds of millions of dollars of general obligation and revenue bonds and notes. Mr. Jessup counsels municipalities on economic revitalization of underutilized properties through redevelopment. Mr. Jessup also works to bridge the private sector need for money to complete community-invigorating projects with public sector financing, including through the issuance of payment in lieu of tax bonds to finance redevelopment projects. Our second panelist, Ellen Sandman, is the business administrator for the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills. She has extensive experience in both municipal management and finance operations. Her previous positions have included such diverse communities as Jersey City, Denville, and Mendham. Our third panelist is Sherry Tracy, Senior Managing Director, is a principal shareholder and member of the Management Committee of Phoenix Advisors, and has nearly 2 decades of experience working with local and state authorities, municipalities, and school districts on tax-exempt and taxable new money, refunding, and debt restructuring issues. She also leads Phoenix Advisors' economic redevelopment financing and consulting engagements. Our next panelist is Kathy Mantell. She has been a partner with Nizavachia LLP for over 20 years and specializes in auditing and financial consulting for public entities. For more than 30 years, she has performed audits and developed unique and specialized accounting and finance services for the firm's 140 municipalities, school districts, charter schools, county colleges, and other governmental agencies. She regularly attends and presents accounting and auditing programs for the League of Municipalities, Government Finance Officers Association, New Jersey Association of School Board Business Officials, and several county associations of school business officials. So right now we'll be starting it off with Matt. Matt?
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is the first of 2 sort of back-to-back sessions on the rating process. Our thought process here was to first examine the rating process from the view of the municipal issuer. How should the municipal issuer prep for and give a presentation before the rating agency in connection with a bond or note issue? So you'll hear from the panel on tricks, how to convince the rating agency that you have that you can get the best rating possible. The second session, we're going to move from the issuer side to the rating agency side. We'll have a member of Moody's up here and a member of S&P up here, and we'll get their perspective on the rating agency process. First, a little bit about what they see as trends in the rating process and in communications with your communities. And then we have a host of questions that have been submitted, I think, from you all already. Hopefully you'll have more questions to ask the rating agency, and we'll try and get a little bit of a sense of what happens between the time when you hang up from your ratings call or leave your ratings presentation and when they send you that report announcing your rating. So we'll go through that process with the rating agency in the second session. But we're going to start with the issuer. As you heard earlier, Ellen Sandman is the administrator in Parsippany. Parsippany just completed a $60-ish million bond issue. So the rating agency process is certainly fresh in Ellen's mind, and obviously went very successfully. Kathy is Parsippany's auditor, also involved, and Sherry is Parsippany's financial advisor. So you sort of have most of the Parsippany team here. I will, for the sake of the team, pretend to be from Dakotas as your bond counsel, and we'll finish off the list and make this all work well. So we sort of start with, when do you need a rating, right? There are the obvious examples of, I have a bond sale. I clearly need a rating when I'm going to do a bond sale. But what are some of the other circumstances when you need a rating? And Sherry, you want to pick up from here?
Sure. So yes, as Matt mentioned, yes, you're going to sell bonds. You need to get a rating. We're also seeing sort of an uptick in issuers that also get notes rated, your bond anticipation notes. Generally, if you're selling 5 to 10 million or less, it's probably not cost effective. Interest rates have been low enough, and the differential between having a note rated and not rated, you really don't make up that difference in the rate you get on the note. But maybe in excess of 10 million or so, you may want to think about it, particularly if you haven't been to the market in a while. In addition, Matt and I were talking, we get a lot of requests from underwriters that may call us before a sale and say, hey, Sherry, I see Parsippany Troy Hills is going to sell an $8 million note next week. You didn't get it rated. However, if I win, will you get it rated for me at my expense, from an underwriter? So you have that consideration too. You may be asked from the market because the underwriters, it becomes more marketable to them. They may be willing to upfront the cost for it. Now, they'll put that in their bid, in their interest rate bid, so you'll really pay for it. But essentially, if they're the winning bidder, then that's great. So you have that to think about. You may have avoided getting the note rated because you didn't want to talk to the rating agencies this year. You maybe wanted to get through 2017 and then maybe talk to them in 18 because of different things happening with your finances. So you have an option to say yes or no to that, certainly. But to bring that up, we have seen also a lot of underwriters asking about that.
Well, I mean, I would just jump in and say, while you have the option, it's interesting, one or two of the bidders, and many of you have probably seen this in the note bids you receive, they now have a stamp that they stamp on the bid that says, if we win, we will get this note rated. It used to be those same banks would call and ask, and we either sometimes said yes, sometimes we'd reach out to you, the issuer, the finance officer, and we'd decide together, or the financial advisor, and decide together, no, we're not willing to go through that process for whatever the reason. Or we ignored it entirely to wait and see what happened, and we got a whole host of bids. The bids went well. But you are seeing some banks that will stamp and say, we will get this rated if we win. So it might, I don't think I've seen it yet, but it might lead you into an interesting circumstance, which is the winning bidder is the bidder that stamps their sheet. Somebody else, the second place, is maybe 2 basis points behind, something like that. Do you want to go through the rating process and the potential for what that may mean to your community, or do you just want to reject the first bid and take the next highest bid for 2 basis points and whatever that may be, $1,000 in debt service or something?
Yes, when we did talk about it, that's when I said, but I would hope that the person or the bank had vetted the town and is asking to get the rating reviewed because they knew it was going to be more of a positive rating. But it's kind of strange after the fact. It just, it does, but it's something for you folks to think about and then make a decision on whether you want to have the laundry aired early than 2018. But thank you.
It's something we should remember to ask the rating agencies in the next session. When I inevitably forget, somebody raise their hand and remind us. We'll ask them that question.
And then the other option, or the other time that you may end up going through a rating review is on debt you guarantee. So maybe you have a local utility authority and you have a service contract with them where that you guarantee their debt, or a parking authority or some other authority in the town. The rating agencies ultimately are going to want to talk to you, the municipality, because you have the rating is really going to be based on, the tax base. And you're ultimately guaranteeing the debt. So maybe your authority is selling bonds and they're going to want to schedule a call and talk to you.
The only one I would add, Sherry, is NJEIT, right?
Right.
You do
Oh,
have,
yeah.
NJEIT has, they sort of consistently review and sharpen their credit criteria, and one of them, as an ad valorem municipality, you still need a rating, an investment grade rating. So if you do not have a rating, then you'll need to go to the market, go out to one of the rating agencies and get a shadow rating, an indicative rating. It doesn't have to be a full-blown public rating like you would get for a bond sale. It's not as expensive. You can't distribute it quite as widely. But the NJEIT will require you to have basically an up-to-date rating in order to borrow through their program at this point.
That's a great point. So in addition to the obvious time of when you would need to have a rating if you're offering debt, selling debt in the market, the rating agencies also do surveillance reviews. These can be annual, these can be every 2 years, these can actually be longer than 2 years, where you may get a phone call from them. All the rating agencies are constantly reviewing your debt. All of you are uploading your information to Emma, the MSRB site, or you have somebody doing that for you. And you're also providing that information sometimes directly to the rating agencies. So they're constantly always looking at your finances. But every once in a while, every few years or so, they haven't talked to you in a while, or they see a trend in some of the numbers, and they're going to want to call you. So they're going to reach out and say, this is just a routine surveillance call. Here's a couple of dates next week. Can we talk? Or maybe here's a list of questions. If you're more comfortable just answering the questions, just send this back to me. So that may happen. And certainly, following a lot of the changes that we saw in the market, post-2008, we're seeing an increase in those surveillance calls and those surveillance reviews.
I assume, Sherry, we should be taking those surveillance reviews as seriously as the review when we're actually going to get a rating. They talk about it's routine. They sort of lull you into the sense of, this is no big deal.
Well, yes, generally, because if they're calling you, then either they haven't talked to you in a while, or they noticed a trend, and it could be a positive trend or it could be a negative trend. And you probably know which one it is, when they're calling. So yes, absolutely. You should prepare for a surveillance call the same way you prepare for a call for a new bond issue. Because action, the same process, and we will ask them next. I think it's very brave that they're going to come up on the panel next and let all of you ask the questions for once. You probably have after having spent years answering their questions. So. But we can, we will certainly ask that. But my understanding is the process is basically the same. So they're going to go to committee afterwards. I mean, they're going to go, and it's going to be the same thing as if you're issuing debt. So it should be taken just as serious, and you should prepare.
And one of the things that we have to do and make sure we do is they're saying they're surveilling us, but we have a right to ask, what made you give us a call, and ask,
of course.
a heads up. I mean, we should know what's going on in our municipalities, but sometimes we might have missed something, or they might have misinterpreted something, and be very proactive and aggressive in saying, this is my town, this is what I do, this is my life's work. So what's up? What are you going to be asking, and what are you looking at? Because you talked about triggers, a trigger event.
The trigger event also may be something too. What could be, so you may just come up on their routine surveillance. And sometimes the lower the credit rating, the more frequently the surveillance. Also, if there's an outlook on your rating, if you have either a positive or a negative outlook, there's going to be a surveillance within 2 years because something's going to happen with that outlook. But the other time when you could be called for a surveillance review is something I'm calling a trigger event. That's just my terminology. Something happens. You have one of your largest taxpayers. There's an article in the paper. They're leaving town. They're closing up, and they're 30% of your tax base. They're moving their headquarters somewhere else. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. We're located pretty close to New York City, and a lot of the rating agencies are based in New York City, so they're going to see those same headlines in the newspaper. So they may call you. That's my example of a trigger event. Or your mayor's at a council meeting, and he's going on talking about how, oh, we'll never be able to afford this, we're going to declare bankruptcy next year, we'll never be able to do this, and that makes the paper. You might get a call from the rating agencies just to try to maybe find out what's happening there. So, they certainly.
Sherry, you couldn't possibly mean in the state of New Jersey. A town. I don't think there's anybody here who would say they have a mayor or a council person that would possibly make that announcement.
Never.
Not only that, when you're talking about newspaper articles and things, I don't know why I'm not coming up, newspaper articles and what people say in meetings, I have found over the years when I've participated in calls that the rating agencies have a set of questions, they have a set of analytics that they do, and you have to go beyond those numbers. You have to think outside the box. And so for years, my clients would get the question, why did you have a deficit 2 years ago? And I'm like, please don't use the D word. You're not looking at this correctly. So in a school district, they have fund balance component that is their capital reserve. And so if they're doing capital projects, they're withdrawing money from their capital reserve. And they're saying, well, they don't say deficit anymore. Why did you have a $1.3 million decline? Well, they pulled the money out to do a capital improvement. So I always think whoever you have on your team to bring all those points together helps out. But sometimes something like that could trigger it, and it's very simple, very easily explained.
So I think the next part of the process is, okay, I need to do a review, or I'm going to be going through a rating agency review. How do I select which agency to work with? So there's several out there. You may look at prior experience. Well, who rates my current debt? What was my last experience with them and the report they provided? Did I feel that it was a fair assessment? Maybe not the best result. We're not all AAA.
You are.
Yeah.
The rating agencies just haven't acknowledged that yet, right? So.
All of our clients are anyway. But not so much that, is it the rating, the ultimate rating you desire? Maybe not. But really overall, how did the process go? Was it a fair assessment? Did you have, a positive experience from it? If not, maybe it really wasn't. Maybe there was some things that were discussed or that you felt you weren't treated. It didn't have maybe not the result you wanted, but some information was in there that maybe you felt wasn't handled correctly or the best way possible. So you say, well, I may, or I think that my numbers, I think I should be a higher rating. You have the option, certainly, just because you've worked with somebody in the past doesn't mean you need to go back to that rating agency. Now, likely that rating agency will still rate your outstanding debt, so you will still have surveillance reviews for the life of that outstanding issue. But it doesn't mean you can't change. Now, with that being said, if you do change, and now you have a few issues rated by different agencies, you're going to have more surveillance reviews because each of them are going to need to do their own surveillance. And some issues may warrant having 2 or 3 ratings. 3 is a little uncommon, particularly at the local level. The state may, but at the local level, sometimes you really, 1 or 2 is 1 certainly, but 2 maybe you have if you have a very large issue, and you want to emphasize your rating to the public.
Does the market care about sort of going back and forth? Is there a sense in the marketplace that if, Parsippany was with S&P 8 years ago and with S&P 6 years ago and with Moody's 4 years ago and back to S&P, is that a concern to the investor at all?
No, generally not. No, they look at it, and they'll still see your other ratings. So if you have a differential of a notch or 2 difference between outstanding debt with one agency and you have a higher rating with a different agency, they still see that. So the bonds typically will still trade to the lower rating. But as far as going back and forth, no, that they know why you're doing it, or bonds trade really with Moody's or Standard & Poor's being really the 2 largest for market share in New Jersey at the local level. They trade the same, so there's not going to be any difference with that.
Keep in mind that when you are getting a rating and you say, I want to be AAA, there are only certain people that are going to be able to accomplish that goal, right? Some people have very positive socioeconomic demographics that are going to get them in that echelon. And then there are other people who are the greatest financial wizards, do the best at controlling the finances of their municipality, but there's no way, based on socioeconomic demographics, that they're ever going to get above where they are. So,
And the rating agency, your representative that you speak with, may tell you that too, and you may see it in the report. This is capped here. You know, we're kind of capped here because maybe because of that. I think that brings up into the next area of how to evaluate, how do you select an agency. Each of them have their own specific criteria, and they look at, we've actually the last few years, all three that we have listed here, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch, have all done some type of revision to their rating criteria since 2013. And so Standard & Poor's in 13, Moody's in 14, and Fitch in 16, and have adjusted their criteria and have been more transparent with what they're using, what factors are they looking at. I think sometimes prior to that, it sort of felt like you had this call and you had no idea what was going to happen afterward. But now that they've published reports and they've shown you these are the measures we're looking at, you need to also, you should use that to your advantage. Take a look at what that criteria is. You know, as you can see, both Standard & Poor's and Moody's look at 30% of the scores based on your economy, your tax base. So there's other measures that make up that, but generally your tax base and the economy in your region is 30%. So you might be capped at a certain level based on where you are and what your tax base is comprised of. And then, you know, we've listed here, Standard & Poor's also looks 20% management, 30% is financial measures, things like budget flexibility, liquidity. 10% is institutional framework. That's the same for everybody in this room because the institutional framework score is the score given to New Jersey. So that score, and it's not New Jersey's rating, so it's the fact that the policies, a lot of the procedures, the fact that New Jersey has some strong oversight in place, the Division of Local Government Services, the Local Finance Board, those things are strengths to the investment community because they see there are certain measures that not all states have that do protect investors. Requirements of, you know, savings of 3% on refundings in order to move forward. Not every state has those. You can't issue variable rate debt. That's a great thing, you know, because we've seen what happens to some issuers that can and maybe didn't understand that certain types of investments and products they were investing in, some swaps, can go upside down on them and can cost a lot of money. But because you can't do that, that's a positive. So that institutional framework is the same for everybody. And then 10% is debt and everybody's favorite, contingent liabilities. Things like pensions, your OPEBs, your post-employment benefits, your policies for paying out sick leave and vacation at retirement. And so Moody's, I'll just run through those kind of quick. Moody's, again, 30% is the tax base, 30% is the finances, looks pretty similar, 20% is management. Now here, they have 20% is debt and pensions. So, and pensions and OPEBs. So maybe that factors in when you're looking at who you're selecting is what some of the underlying criteria. And again, a lot of this is detailed further in the releases that they've put out to see what actual numbers are they looking at to measure debt. What numbers are they looking at to measure my budget performance or my surplus, things like that. Now, Fitch, they don't actually have a set weighting system where they say there's a specific weight given to each category, but they look at 4 key rating factor assessments, and generally they're similar, you know, with revenues, expenditures, your debt liability, and your operating performance.
So that could end up being a benefit or a detriment, right? Aren't we all subject to subjective reviews and objective reviews?
Yeah.
Could be a positive, could be a negative, so
Right.
keep that in mind.
Okay, so you've picked your rating agency. Now we're going to apply for a rating. Generally, this can be done via email. The professionals you're working with will know who the contact is at each of the rating agencies to request a rating. This can be done. Some of them have an online platform where everything can be filled out. Some may just be done via email, and you may actually, probably in most cases, you're going to have to review an application, maybe complete some information, sign it, send it back. Again, most cases, it's usually going to have a fee disclosure on it as well, so you'll see what the cost of that rating is. And generally, you need to sign that before you can move forward with the process, because they need to understand, specifically if someone like your financial advisor is requesting on your behalf, they want to know that you're aware of this too, and you know what the fee is before they move forward.
It's also helpful that they publish those fees to the extent you start to do an analysis of, do I want to issue bonds? Do I want to stay in notes? What are the costs if I do a bond sale? Or even going all the way back, the question about whether or not you get notes rated, right, which is a little bit trickier. Most of us do non-rated, non-documented notes versus rated notes with a POS. And part of that analysis is, well, how much does the rating cost, right? And am I going to make more than that in the interest rate savings by virtue of having the rating? Those schedules are out there. They're pretty easy to track down. So, you know, it's a valuable tool to help in that.
I was just going to say that, though, my experience is we all make very close relationships with our banking community and our financial community. So I feel that they're there for you. So goes Parsippany, so goes Provident, or so goes Capital One, or what's in my wallet. But so anyway, later. So anyway, that being said, I think I would say I would not really think we would need it, especially if you're confident that you have great relationships with your banking community and the financial community, and you have a great story to tell, and or they know that you're working on some of the things that are not quite there, like when we're going to talk a little bit about that unfunded liability and what does that mean.
And then we've just listed up here a few, some documents you're going to submit to. So maybe once you submit the application, you have an analyst assigned that's going to be working with you. We're going to need to send them some financials, some things to get them started on reviewing. If this is part of a bond sale, there's going to be your preliminary official statement that they're going to want to review before the call, your most current budget, the current year's budget, your 3 most recent audits. If it's a time of year in the beginning of the year, the audit's not done yet, we'll send them the AFS as well, but we'll still need the 3 prior years. Your annual debt statement may be helpful as well. And the demographic information that's generally consistent. I'm saying with Appendix A, sometimes it's not always Appendix A, but you know the information I'm talking about, your unemployment rate, your tax collection rate, information about you, about your town. All that information they'll want to review as well.
All of the things that everybody is filing perfectly on time with Emma year after year after year, right now under in a post-MCDC world.
So I have 2 comments with respect to that. Sherry alluded to, if your audit's not done, the work from the AFS. So as an auditor, we've prepared unaudited financial statements, so they would be from the AFS in the format that they're accustomed to seeing. And my other comment is with Appendix A, we used to have a war about what was going to go in the official statement in terms of Appendix A, because in the schools, they have a CAFR and they have all that statistical and demographic information in the reports, but municipal reports, we don't have that. So it was creating an issue where you have to update that information on a regular basis, as Matt referred to the Emma website. So that's something to keep in mind, that anything that's in that preliminary official statement, an official statement is information that you have to continually update.
So now we have our team assigned, we know who we're going to be working with. Now it's time to prepare for our call, or maybe our site visit. So building the presentation. You want to work with certainly work with your professionals, your auditor, your municipal advisor, your bond counsel as well. Your auditors, Kathy mentioned a great point. There's probably, I won't say nothing worse, because there is definitely worse, but if you're having a call and it's maybe April or May, and you're talking to an analyst and they're saying, well, how did last year end up? And you're like, yeah, I don't really know. Like, my audit's not done yet, I'm not sure. You have the AFS, but also, as Kathy mentioned, a lot of times your auditor will prepare some statements that look just like what the rating agencies are used to looking at from your audit, but they're unaudited at this point, but they're exactly to kind of show those numbers so we can really talk about where you ended up, because now it's April or May and we're almost halfway through the next year. So if we can give them a good picture, a good picture of where we ended up, especially if it was a positive year, or even if it wasn't, we need to address it. But to be able to give them that information and to have it ready for them is very beneficial, because it's going to reflect good on you and on your community as well.
Before we leave the working team, one of the things that I know you all consider, working with your professionals, yes, but you have your finance director, you have your tax assessor that you really want to have meetings with and conversations with about the questions that are going to be asked. In our case, in Parsippany, our tax assessor, which has 30 years' experience as the tax assessor, also brings to the fact that he is also our economic development individual. So brings a lot to bear that when there are conversations on the phone, in this case, we had a discussion. If we had more time, I think, to see what's going on in Parsippany in these last couple of years, last 5 years, 4 years, it's a tremendous growth. We're in that corridor between New York and Pennsylvania, and we're right there. It's, all roads do lead to Parsippany, with regard to, oh, that's our new commercial. There's a lot of pride there, but, 80, 46 to 287, Route 10, I won't go on, 202. But anyway, just threw that in. You love your community. You work hard for your community. It's not just a job. I'm a certified finance officer. I may be a BA, but I love you guys because your heart and soul is in it. They're not numbers to you. They're people's lives, and that comes across. And be passionate on the phone because you are passionate about what you do, and make sure that you have your specialist. I was talking to Matt preparing for this, and I was saying, I have a financial director, and I said, do you want to make sure that this group is very physical fit? And I said, she is. She teaches jazzercise. He didn't like that. He said, don't say that. So I said it anyway. She's right there, and later on, if you need a class before you go to the big dinners, she'll be happy to help you out. I think I'm done right now.
So on this point, you're too funny. On this point, people do ask the question, who should be involved in the call? You know the old saying, 2 heads are better than 1. Well, 3 or 4 are even better yet. Because when this is your big performance, this is your debut, and you want to bring to the table everything you can. So Sherry will come up and have a comment that just sets the world on fire, and while she's talking, Ellen, in a conference call, is like, oh, she just reminded me of something else. This is how you put your best foot forward. You get the team of people, you can talk about one thing, and it is amazing how everything evolves, how everybody just comes out of the woodwork, and in this list of items that we're talking about, we talk about weak points, how to address the problem areas, and it is amazing how everybody can feed into that. I remember getting off of a call in a town that really wasn't doing that well, and I hung up the phone and I said, I can't believe I said half of those things. They were true, but they were very, very optimistic and very rosy, and that's what you always want to do. Admit to your problems, but always say, we have this under control, and we know what we're going to do going forward. Never say, oh, we don't know, we don't have a plan. So it's really a fun process.
And I think one of the greatest things that have come out the last few years as the rating agencies have revised their rating criteria is the fact that they're showing you now. They're showing you the exact ratios, the exact numbers, the exact categories of what they're looking at to come to your rating. So use that. Use that as your guide when you're going to prepare and talk to them. Show them what percentage debt is of your expenditures, your overall expenditures. They're going to do the calculation anyway, but put it forward so and then use, we can look at the guide together and see where your rating is going to fall. I remember, maybe it's too much information, but when one of the agencies came out with this iPad app on their new credit builder, you could actually download this app and you could go in, take a town and run it through and like basically almost build the rating. I was so excited. Like I was like, this is great. I stayed up that night and I put like a few through because it was something we didn't have access before. To that information. So we knew the types of things they looked at, but really they're giving you all this information, so use it to your benefit. So you can put your best foot forward. And I think, with that, we kind of highlighted a lot of this. Let's review some specific factors that you want to highlight. Maybe there are things that are not in the criteria, but there are exciting things happening in the town, some planned, almost all the questions, you're always going to see the question about what else is happening? What kind of growth is there to your tax base, residential, commercial, what else is happening? So think about it. Talk with the other, use, as Ellen and Kathy both said, use the other professionals at your municipality, your tax assessor, your economic development director, whoever it may be, to find out what else is happening, what's coming down the line that we can talk about, and some other factors that are your strengths. And coupled with that, discuss how you're going to address the weak points, any problem areas. We did have a big drawdown in fund balance. We didn't replenish we did appropriate half of our surplus last year, and we didn't regenerate it all like we thought we were going to. Well, let's talk about what happened. Let's find out what happened, and let's talk about what the plan is to get it back up if that's what you want to do. And be very upfront about that because they're going to see it. And so better for you to address it and have a plan of how you're going to handle it and know what led to it because you'll be asked the question. And with that, the analysts are great. They almost always provide the questions in advance. So it's wonderful. They give you the list of the things that they're going to talk about. There may be some other things that come up on the call that aren't on there, but generally everything that they're thinking, because remember, we sent them all those financials, they had a chance to look at things, so they formulated their questions. And they're giving those to you. They don't want to surprise you. They just want to know what the answer is. So they looked at these things and they want to get the truth out of it too. So use those questions, discuss them with your professionals in advance, and then just be prepared. So I think Ellen kind of touched a little bit on this. Should we do, most of the rating reviews are generally done as a call, but sometimes it's good to have a site visit. Again, our proximity to New York City, where a lot of the analysts are based, is great because a lot of them know New Jersey. A lot of them may live in New Jersey. So they don't necessarily need as many site visits as they may if they were rating towns in Florida or Texas or Missouri, because they can't picture what those towns look like accurately, to see it. So they might need the site visit more. But here they generally, they may already know your community, they may live in it. But still, you may want to do a site visit anyway. It's been a while, and there's a lot of development happening. We want to go show them that new office park that opened up. We want to show them this. All this residential housing coming. We want to show them what's happening here in town and drive them around, show them how easy it is to get around and where the people live and the type of houses that are here and things. So, discuss that. And I have to say, I have the rating agencies have always been accommodative. Now, for them, it means probably a day out of their schedule, but I've never had anyone say, we can't do a site visit. So you just need to, do enough time in advance. No additional charge for it, so it doesn't change your rating fee. Your rating fee is the same whether you do it on the phone or in person.
Can't even give them lunch or coffee
No.
or anything, so it's a pretty cheap
Yeah.
visit.
No, I wish we had had more time because, for example, one of the things we're real proud of just recently, we finalized on a building. The state of New Jersey gave to UPS to build in New Jersey, and that we kept them there. Kept them in Parsippany, and it's a $40 million grant that was given, and they built a building. It's all the IT, it's all the back office. There will be no packages coming out of this building. It's all the back office. But they promised us about 800 jobs. There are 1,100 jobs there. And we're talking about a good 1,000 jobs at 6 figures. So I would have loved to take them to the state-of-the-art building. It's a magnificent building for, and with the new accoutrements of, the gym, the dining, the thought process, the area. That in and of itself was a phenomenal addition, as well as other things we could have taken them to and, showed them, just how well we're actually doing. But we still did a good job. But it is difficult on the phone because it was like about three and a half hours we were talking, and, people
They're not
were-
usually that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And if you know
I
Ellen
think I was
Sandman,
talking. I think I had a little to do with that.
if you know Ellen Sandman, she really does like to do tours. I think that's what she's going to do in her retirement. She promised me a tour of Jersey City one day, and I'm waiting for that.
We have some Jersey City people that will help.
Now it's on record. Everybody in this room is a witness.
We talked a little bit about who should participate, both internally and externally, at the town. Some people will say too, especially if it's a site visit, oh, the mayor wants to be there, the mayor wants to talk. And that can be, generally a great thing, absolutely a great thing. You probably don't want the mayor giving the presentation because the mayor is usually an elected official. You want the CFO, the administrator should really be doing.
I have to just say, you said that very nicely. You got out of that one.
Well, they.
Okay.
We're doing this at Conference of Mayors, and I can't wait to see how it goes when you hit this slide.
She'll put a different
That
spin on
conference.
it then.
But it is fantastic when they are there to welcome everybody, start off, give a little background, 10 or 15 minutes, and to be there certainly for the presentation if they're, if they're able to. I think it's great. But mostly you want your CFO, your administrator, doing most of the talking and certainly answering most of the questions. Kathy and I are going to pipe in and, we'll answer some and some certain things, but generally we're more anecdotal. We're adding a few things to it. It's really, they want to hear from you. You're the one that's there every day.
No, you're not anecdotal. It's a team. We're all together in this, and everybody plays a very key part. And that, if you recognize that and work, and as you said, Cass, one thing brings out something else that, because we've been in this field, we've been doing this, and something else will remind you of something. So, no, you're a very important part.
Thank you.
Even though you say things about mayors. I just wanted to go on record in case there's mayors.
No, I think it's great when they're there. It's great when
There
they're
are some.
Now, you may have some follow-up information. Generally, after a call, there may be some questions, some information that they may ask you to provide. Certainly, if there's some formal policies you may have, they may want to see, some things you've shared with your council, or some capital planning you're doing, some budget projections you have going forward. You're putting those types of things together. They may want to see them because that's great, and that's all going to factor into that 20% management score. So just be prepared and try to react pretty quickly to that. So on the call with the things that they're asking for, try to be prepared to get that to them right away because generally they already probably have their rating committee scheduled. Knowing that the call or the visit was scheduled, they probably already have it scheduled, and they're going to want to include that information. And with that also, generally on the call too, you're going to probably want to schedule a time with them. Again, they probably know when they're going to bring this to committee. So they're going to say, okay, I'm going to committee next Monday afternoon. I can have a report available to you Tuesday morning. Is Tuesday morning a good time for you to review it? Because you're really going to have a very limited amount of time to look at the report, particularly if the rating is going to change. In general, because it is still confidential at that point. It's only for you at the town and your working group to be able to talk about and review. You're reviewing that report because you want to make sure that there's no confidential information that should be kept out of it. Private information, stuff about negotiations. You're talking about contract settlements. You don't have a contract done yet, but you said in there you're feeling pretty confident we're going to settle at 2%. It's not done yet, so you don't want to say that in a public report. So that's why you're looking at that to review. Also, you want to make sure it's accurate. They may have misheard you on something. So you want to review that. But again, they can't leave that report out there for days because it's particularly if there is a change, you don't, there's not, it could be shared. It could be leaked to the community. Investors could see, somebody could find out that your rating is going to change and the bond's going to change a little bit. I know this isn't like Martha Stewart and, the bond market's not going to go crazy on what's happening. But,
We can also let the rating
insider,
agencies talk about
insider
why,
trading. But
right,
yes,
why they have such
exactly.
low
I should
funds.
leave
So
that,
we'll get into
leave
that
that
with
to
the rating
them. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
And then really the next few slides, we've just kind of showed you a sample of some information. We generally, would like to put a presentation together. So it's certainly, you don't need to have it. The rating agencies are absolutely fine going through their list of questions with you. But again, if you're reviewing and you're knowing what the criteria is, it's very helpful to organize some of that data for them. I think it helps keep the flow of the call on point, on topic, and again, you're showing the information. So, we just included a couple of things that we think are generally important, some things we included for Parsippany Troy Hills to just, sort of show you the types of information that you do want to provide. And again, it kind of falls in those categories: economic information, financial performance, summary of your debt, and any kind of formal or informal policies you may have as well.
So we make all kinds of promises over the telephone, and we say, we have a great handle on our finances. We know where we're going this year, next year. We just had a surveillance call in Mendham, and CFO handled it very well. And I added that they have all these spreadsheets. They can demonstrate how they're paying their debt down. They have very, very well thought out plan. And I said, offer them to them, and that's what helps put the picture all together. Having being able to demonstrate fund balance, various reserves that are on the balance sheet. Sherry touched on twice now the policies, and we had a conversation and we said, by and large, I don't think many municipalities have a formal policy. Perhaps they do. Perhaps a lot of you in the room do. Does anybody? Okay, we were saying if you have a policy, it's probably pretty general to allow for stuff that happens, right? But we demonstrate through the phone call that although there's not a formal policy per se, we have these procedures that occur. We have the auditor who's involved at the budget process and talks with the elected officials and talks with the administration. So there's this good avenue of communication, and that gives them another good feeling. So the whole idea is you're up there tap dancing. You want it to be a really nice show, debut, put everything you got into it, and you'll get what you want out of it.
I think one of the things when discussing how we were going to approach today, I kept saying and address the elephant in the room, the unfunded liability. And I didn't realize that in Kathy's Kathy's world.
That means something totally different.
Right, and so I said, gee, I don't know, why do you keep looking at me? And then she'll explain, but what I'm saying here is the rating agency wasn't talking to that, so I said, well, I'm going to bring it up, the unfunded liability, and, we've turned around paying down the police payouts tremendously in the last 3 years. But what we also did in negotiations, we were able to negotiate with the police department, and I know a lot of you have worked on this, and we were able to say that after 2014, no police officer can make more than $15,000 in the sick bank or whatever, and that got in there. And the other thing we did was we created, and we've created the thing in the labor contracts where I will buy down your sick bank in 2016 numbers as opposed to a payout in 2025. So, and they like it because what is that? That gives somebody say, hey, I always wanted to buy a motorcycle while I could still drive a motorcycle, or that ring from my wife that I promised, or that trip around the room, the vacation. And so people are drawing down on their sick bank and saying, I get the money, the value of money, and in the long run, we've paid down quite a bit of our unfunded liability. So that's how I was referring to it. But then Kathy said,
We're down to 2 minutes left, and I said to Sherry, I got to get this last point in. And so when you talk about unfunded liability, I'm thinking of pension. I'm thinking of PERS and PFRS, and I said to her, wait a minute, Ellen, are you telling me that on that pension bill, you're able to pay more than the annual contribution? No. This is where we had the meeting of the minds, and we found out we were on two different planes. But anyway, it was in the 2015 audits that GASB 68 applied. Municipalities do not report under generally accepted accounting principles. They report under other comprehensive basis of accounting, and so it becomes a footnote in the long-term debt section. And so I said to Sherry and Matt, how do those numbers impact what the rating agencies are looking at? Because we did find in the last 2 years that those numbers are staggering.
I think we'll hear a lot about that probably in a few minutes.
There we go, we're leading in.
I think if we're going down, if you just want to just show the slides, I mean, we'll just go through them.
Oh, sure. So why don't you close up, and we'll just
Yeah.
cycle through these few slides that show some additional data information.
Okay, could we have a round of applause for a fantastic presentation? Thank you so much. And if you get a chance, please remember to log on to gfoanj.org and complete the survey. Thank you so much.
I think you're good.